new. Lord, I'm ready for change. I can't keep living like this. I don't wanna be the same. Lord, I'm ready for change. From the inside out, I don't wanna be the same.
Welcome to Ready for Change. I am your host, Simmone L, Bowe, and you are tuned into the show where we don't just talk change, we live change. I am so happy to be a part of this movement because truly transformation is what counts today. It doesn't matter whether it's in your personal life, in your business, in your career. Life is about change. Life is about movement from one point to the other. We're always going through milestones and turning points in our lives, and we need to have the strategies to navigate those successfully. Otherwise, we will stay stuck, frustrated, angry, and really not our best self because we never stop evolving as a person. I've realized that, and I've made that my journey and resolved to commit myself to constantly evaluate myself, where I'm going, my vision, what it is that I want to achieve. What am I looking forward to? What am I working toward? What am I striving? And in the midst of all of that, to celebrate all of the things that I've done, to celebrate who I am and to recognize that I am enough. I'm not striving because I'm looking to fill a void. I am striving because it is fulfilling my destiny. There's a big difference. And so I am so happy that you have decided to tune into the show, Ready for Change. Tonight we have an exciting topic, really because it's a total different spin on what you would normally think about, and that is grief. Grief, a response to change. That's our topic tonight. Stick and stay. We're going to take a short commercial break and be right back.
This is Capri Smith, your uncuffed living expert. I want to take a moment and speak to my women entrepreneurs. If you have your own business card in the name of your business, but you struggle when someone asks what it is you do, that is a problem. If you are not making money that's going to build your legacy and sustain your family, that is a problem. I invite you to hop on over to caprismith.com, join my free newsletter, and while you're there, schedule your strategy session. I want to help you uncover some things that you should already know. I spent 20 years perfecting my craft, and I'm willing to share all of what I know with you today. If you're not living uncuffed, you're just not living. And if you're cuffed in your business, your clients will know that and they won't invest in you. So let's connect. Until next time, have an awesome day.
Hey, Chef Jovi here of the Eatsperience Radio Show. Join me 10 a.m. every Thursday to explore recipes, best restaurants, and food spots in and around the country. I look forward to receiving your comments, so follow us on Spreaker.com to tune into the show. That's SPREAKER.com. And search MWHY Radio to join me every Thursday, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time for the Eatsperience Radio Show. And remember to share your Eatsperience.
If you're the parent of a child with behavioral challenges that has been suspended, expelled, or just not able to make it in a traditional school setting, there is an alternative. Call the Metropolitan Day School today. Licensed and accredited grades K through 12. Call 804-321-2595. Financial assistance and after-school programs are available. Let's turn this school year around right now at the Metropolitan Day School, where Eagles soar. Call Ms. Thomas today. 804-321-2595.
Welcome back to the show, Ready for Change. I'm your host, Simmone L. Bowe. It's my pleasure to welcome our expert guest for tonight, Mrs. Cecilia Askew. And she has had 35 years of banking and finance experience until she went into what she calls her true calling. And she has undertaken a vast amount of studies at the Oxford Brookes University in the UK, where she did Christian studies, the Institute of Counselling in Scotland, where she covered pastoral counseling, the College of Pastoral Supervision and Psychotherapy in New York, where she did clinical pastoral education for chaplaincy, and the Wayne Oates Pastoral Institute in Kentucky, where she did grief training, among other courses. She is a guidance counselor and chaplain at a local school here in the Bahamas, and she's the coordinator of the Diocesan Pastoral Care Ministries with the Anglican Diocese of the Bahamas and Turks and Caicos Islands. So she comes with a wealth of experience, and certainly well equipped from personal experience, as you're going to hear about this topic of grief. I personally went through a grief recovery class, and it was amazing the way that panned out, because it wasn't anything that I actually signed up for per se. I was doing a presentation at a human resource conference, and a psychiatrist came up to me and he said, "I would like for you to promote a program that I'm doing," right out of the blue. And he said, "Let's talk about that." And so we met, and he said, "I do a grief recovery class, and I'd like to really promote it because I think that it's important and that people would benefit from it. What I'd like to do is have you sit through the class. Once you've go through the class and you see the process, how it's done, what it's like, what the benefits are, the impacts, then we can talk about promoting the program. What do you think?" And so I said, "Sure. I'm always about learning and doing something new, and so if I could get into a free class, I'm going to go into that free class." And sure enough, I signed up, pulled a friend along to join me, and we sat in this small group for grief recovery. About 1 month into that program, I kid you not, my mother died at the beginning of the month, which was a massive hit for me because she was my only surviving parent. So that was a tremendous loss for me. And then at the end of the month, I went to divorce court. I was already separated from my husband at the time, and this is now about a year later, and everything was finalized and had to go into court. And that divorce went through at the end of that month. So in the space of 4 weeks, I had 2 major losses. Even though, the divorce was something that was necessary for my own well-being, it was still a loss. There's still so many emotions attached to it because no one ever goes into a marriage with the view that you're going to break up. No one ever really goes in with that in the back of your mind. You go in thinking that this is going to work, you're going to be happy, and whatever you're going through, you can work it out. And it was that mindset that kept me in the marriage for such a long time. Actually, we got divorced about 2 days before what would have been our 12th year anniversary. So it was a lot. It was major change for me because for that last 12 years, I was accustomed to having a husband. So that was that companionship. That was just, the act of being married. Someone who did most of all of the taking care of the home in terms of paying bills and this and that. I remember having to learn so much for myself on my own, just on how to be independent. Had to live on my own, had to fend for myself. So there were several changes even within that one act of a divorce. There's so many things that had to be dealt with. The separation between the families. I had to go through being shunned by his family and being looked at differently, even by church folk. And, there was just a whole lot that had to be faced. And it was a major decision, but one that I felt that was necessary for me and my well-being. And so being in that grief recovery class was a divine intervention in what could have completely broken my life. And I am so grateful to that psychiatrist, Dr. Wayville Thompson. God bless his soul. He's now deceased. And, I've never promoted the program. He never asked me about it again. And I just knew that was a divine intervention to shore me up, to give me the strength that I needed to understand and to process those tremendous losses that I went through at that time in my life, actually about 10 years ago now. And so I'm really, really excited that we're going to be talking about this on this show tonight, grief, a response to change, because it doesn't matter what you go through. You can get a promotion and still feel a sense of loss because you're moving away from something that's familiar. You're moving away from people that are familiar. You're moving away from skill sets and tasks that are familiar into something that you have to learn, into a new social group, a new status. So there are lots of things to adjust to. You know, you could buy your first home and feel a sense of loss, leaving that apartment that you may have been in and comfortable in, and, you know, the heavy responsibility of keeping up with a mortgage. You know, it's a whole different feeling of, you know, getting evicted from an apartment than from losing everything that you would have invested in a home. And so there are lots of feelings attached to change and growth and movement. And so this show, I know, is going to really enlighten you about what is grief, the emotions that are attached to grief, and how you can process it and come through on the other side positively and stronger than you were before. So after this commercial break, we're going to be right back to talk with our special guest tonight, Mrs. Cecilia Askew. Stick and stay with us.
Are you frustrated, disappointed, discouraged with your life? Are you angry with God? What's holding you back from fulfilling your purpose? Are you struggling as a leader in ministry? Do you believe you have an end-time calling? If you answered yes to any of these questions, tune in to the Waymakers on MWHY Radio Network every other Friday at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. We are here to support you. Join us to get the answers that will prepare the way of the Lord in your life.
Hello, I'm Sherelle of Fit and Flow Yoga Radio. Wake up with me every Friday at 6 a.m. and have a wonderful yoga experience. We'll explore meditation and discuss how various yoga postures can help relieve your everyday stress. We'll also make the connection between our faith and wellness. Follow us on Spreaker.com to tune into the show. That's Spreaker, Spreaker.com. And also search MWHY Radio to join me every Friday at 6 a.m. for Fit and Flow Yoga Radio with Sherelle. And until next time, surrender to your strength and always embrace your flow.
Welcome to Ready for Change. I am your host, Simmone L, Bowe, and I am really looking forward to this topic tonight. We are talking about grief, a response to change. A lot of times people do not consider grief as something that people deal with outside of death. But grief is a response to any type of loss that a person may experience. Even if it's a positive experience, we still experience a sense of loss. And so I am honored to have Mrs. Cecilia Askew here, and she is a guidance counselor and chaplain at a private Christian school here in the Bahamas. She's also the coordinator of the Diocesan Pastoral Care Ministries for the Diocese of the Bahamas and Turks and Caicos. This is the Anglican Church, or Episcopalian, as is referred to in the United States. She comes with a very strong background, starting first of all in banking and finance. And she's done studies in the UK, in Scotland, in New York, in Kentucky, in the areas of Christian studies, pastoral counseling, clinical pastoral education for chaplaincy, and of course, grief training. Welcome to the show, Mrs. Askew.
It's good to be here. Not sure who that person is, but
that's what they all say.
But I'm filling in. Good.
Well, we're really happy to have you here. This is something that when I had an opportunity to go through a grief recovery class, it was very enlightening, very eye-opening, because it just gave me a whole different perspective of grief, what it is, and how to respond to it, and how to care for people and help people, support people through what we would call grieving.
Right.
So tell us, first of all, what is grief?
My interpretation, having had the experience more than I would care to say, is that it is the mind, emotion, and body's response to a loss. You cannot separate one from the other. From your body, I can say from experience, you would tend not to eat because you're just not there. And so you would have lost weight, not intentionally, but that's the aftermath. Emotionally, what's next?
Right.
The plan that you had going forward is now no longer the plan because that individual is not there. And of course, from your mind, it's like, why?
Right.
Why? And I think no matter who you are, what your background is, there's always the why. Not necessarily why me, just why.
Right.
In its totality. And so for me, grief is a very personal and individual journey.
Absolutely, and I'm glad you said that, because a lot of times when we talk about, again, the responses to grieving people, persons who are not grieving don't tend to understand what the grieving person is going through, and they want to rush that along, really because that person grieving is making them uncomfortable, because they don't know what to do.
Very much so, very much so. And what I would want to do at this stage is just basically give you some of the classical stages of grief to put it in perspective, so that, and this is not in any order, because we all start at a different place. Personally, mine was relief, because in two instances, and all three actually, the persons were terminally ill.
Right.
So there was suffering involved.
Right.
So when they died, it was relief in the first instance. But as you go along,
all these other emotions come up.
So you would have a shock and a denial, a pain and a guilt, anger and bargaining. And actually, it's been a number of years, and I'm at that place now, bargaining. What if? Suppose I was there,
right?
Type thing. Depression, reflection, loneliness. And once you would have gotten through those, then you begin to see the upward turn, where you begin to accept, okay, this is what it now is. That's then, this is now. And then you begin to work through it until you eventually begin to see the light at the end of the tunnel. So, you know what, I can make this.
Right, because a lot of times we feel we can't survive.
No, but you have to work. You have to work it. It's not going to happen overnight. And no one can tell you that on Monday next week it'll be over.
Right. And that's the tendency, is like, hurry this along.
Yeah, why are you still grieving?
Right.
I hear people want to know, why are you still wearing your rings? Because that's what they are, rings.
Obviously, they mean something to you.
And while they mean something to me, it doesn't mean that I'm still grieving in that aspect.
Absolutely.
I'm wearing the rings because they're rings and they're mine.
Right. Hello.
If you choose not to wear yours, that's how you're going to deal with it.
Right. So put into context for our listeners then what those rings represent and what experience you, as much as you'd like to share about that.
When it comes to the rings, these are not the rings that I got married with. And that's the difference.
Okay.
This ring that I wore is the one that I always would have wanted from childhood and ever wanting to be married. I always just wanted a plain gold band. And so this was a present, an anniversary present that was given. And so that's why I wear that, because that's a gift. The wedding rings are tucked away nicely somewhere else. I look at them occasionally and okay, but I'm not wearing those exact rings.
Right.
So to me, that's a distinguishing.
It showed some movement, a progression
away from that. But I tend to continue to wear, and my foundation for that is my support group. I was in a support group for a number of months because, again, and we'll talk about that later, what it really means to be supported. And I found these little old gray-haired ladies still wearing their wedding bands, and their husbands were now dead, some 5-6 decades.
Exactly.
Okay? But they were not talking about their rings.
My mom never took her wedding ring off.
And I said, you know what? So it's not a crime to still wear the ring, And should the Lord decide, well, he wants to give you somebody else, well, obviously that person is going to give you a new ring.
Exactly.
So until then, I wear the rings I have.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And so, again, very personal to the individual. You have to do what's going to make you feel like, one, you're progressing, and two, that you still have some memory.
Right. I was going to ask, what is the connection or the role of mementos like that, when people will hold on to things that, like you said, is a memory, or it helps to ground them in a particular way? Because I also wear a ring all the time on my left thumb.
Right.
And it wasn't intentional to wear it on my left thumb, but it became a habit, and it was something for me that represented you need to continually remind yourself to be yourself.
Be yourself.
And so for me, that is my thing.
Yes.
Whenever I see this ring or I feel the ring, I am reminding myself to be authentic.
Be authentic.
And so that's for me.
Yes.
Now, people may just think it's fashion or whatever.
Yeah, but no, it has a different meaning for you. One of the grief trainings that I did, which I loved because it spoke to me, was that you use the arts, like drama or music, or if you like nature, as I do, then you use nature to build your memorials. That's why they have memorials. Not because you're just morbidly grieving this individual, but you want to celebrate. So memorials should really be celebrations of that person's life. And so I know for a fact that if you liked, say, a pear tree, then maybe I'd get a plant or whatever and let it grow in your memory. Right. And so when I'm eating this fruit, I'm thinking positively. Right. That this is something.
Is a celebration of life.
Celebration
and
of
a continuation
life.
of life.
And a continuation of life. And a legacy. Right. Because as we move on, as we will in our time, you would hope to have left a legacy that somebody else will continue. Right. And so memorials tend to do that, help you continue a legacy.
When do memorials or mementos, things like that, become too much or become a crutch?
Okay. There is what we call in grief, morbid grief. And so you can have that stance where, okay, don't touch that. Right. Because he's coming back. Well, it's been 30 years. He's not back. But don't touch that.
Don't go into that room.
Don't go into that room. And the room looks exactly the way it did that little Johnny died. Yeah. Some 30, 40, 50 years ago. Right. And you're not to touch that. And so that's a bit much. Right. Okay. Right. Because after 50 years, Johnny isn't coming back. All right. But unfortunately, if the person does not have a grounding in faith, if they do not have the benefit of good counselor and a support group, they can get stuck right there.
In grief.
In grief. Right. And at one particular stage of grief, because remember now, you go through those stages, but then you begin to move forward. Right. Each step is taking you that much closer to away from what happened in the past, preparing you for the future. Right. You see? So you can get stuck at pain and guilt forever. Particularly if it was a spouse and the last word he says, man, carry your. Yeah. And then you get the phone call. Oh.
And that was the last.
And that was the last thing
I didn't get to tell you I love you.
And that will plague you and haunt you for, thankfully that was not my experience. Thank goodness. But there are people who would have had that. Yeah. And as grief counselors, you have to help them understand that was something that happened then. he or she, because it could be a male or female, would have understood that you were still in love with them. But in the heat of the moment of an argument, some things were said. And that can happen whether you die or not. You just say some things. The only difference is you get an opportunity to resolve and say sorry. And so one of the exercises that I advocate when we have here at Holy Cross, our annual grief retreats, is that you do what we call a special letter.
Yes.
Where you're able to write out to that person those things that you would have loved to have said.
Yes.
Very, very comforting, very releasing.
Yes.
Because it allows you now to say to this person, you just get it out there. I'm so sorry for what I mind you. I don't know if that's what you're saying, but it gives the person an opportunity to resolve some issues in that fashion, and it's personal. Yeah. Nobody needs to know about it but you and God. And so, that's an exercise that we love to say to people, let's do this now and help them.
I did that before and I found it to be very helpful. Yes. With someone that I dated and then he went missing at sea. And we didn't end on very good terms. Yes. And so it was no ill will, but he was angry because I broke it off because of faith reasons and all these other things. And so he was very angry with me. Right. We never really resolved that, and then he went missing. And so he's not been recovered. And so for me, I went through all of those stages that you talked about.
Was it something I said?
Exactly. And then his sister didn't make it any better because she said, well, if he was still with you, he wouldn't have gone missing. And I was like, oh my gosh. And so it makes you feel really bad to think, what if she's right? And all of these other things. What did I make the right decision? And all of this sort of thing. And so, it does plague you and play on your mind. And so I want to talk about those stages a little bit more. And not in the context of death. No. Because again, as I said, grief can be a response to change. Changing environment.
Change of employment. Change in marital status. Change in any type of relationship, whether it's children and parents, because now you've reached a place where children are ready to go off to college. And parents are still not ready. Because I'm still changing your diaper type thing. Yes. And here you are telling me you're grown. And I found it very interesting. I've been drawn to watching some of these reality shows. And some of them I know it's just CRAP. Yeah. But this particular one with the tankards, where there's an episode where the daughter is now getting ready to go off to college. And the father said, you're still my baby. And then she made it worse by introducing this nice vanilla, handsome guy into this very chocolate family.
Oh my goodness. So that's lots of changes going on.
And so he's there. And I say, oh dear. Yes. So that's a grief. We are laughing at it, but it's a grief because he's really feeling the anxiety of his daughter, who he's taught to be virtuous and who he's praying still
still virtuous.
And now you see this man coming into play. She's going off to college.
What are they going to be doing over there?
And that's exactly what they're going to be doing. And that's a real grief for a parent. Yeah. In a marital situation, breakdown of the relationship, no return. And very much pain and guilt because you feel as though it was all you when in fact it wasn't. Probably was all him. But but you've been made to feel it's all you. And so you go through that. And so you have to now reconcile the fact that, okay, particularly if you're from a family where divorce was the bad word.
Yes. You just don't do that.
And you just don't do. You stay there and you take the blows and you take the beating and whatever it is and you get on with life and you smile in public, but you get behind closed doors and fight like cats and dogs and suffer. And so that was the norm. But now in the 21st century, some of us are saying, I ain't for that.
Right. I'm not about that life, as they say.
Not about that life. So I will turn up, as young people say, and walk out the door. Yeah. Okay? So but again, a real grief.
What about people getting married? Can't that be a grieving? Because some people have a challenge leaving their families.
And their parents.
And singleness.
Because I did getting married late in life. And thank God for the Holy Spirit. Because, you've been used to doing things on your own. Didn't have to ask anybody anything. Didn't have to tell anybody anything. Didn't have to, because it had to be done. It got done. Now you have somebody who's saying, but shouldn't we have discussed
this first?
And you're like,
Discuss what?
Thank you.
Dude.
What are we discussing? It needed to be done. It's done. Okay. But, so that aspect is, but, then you have to eat humble pie because you're like, yeah, well, he's right. I really should have, especially since it was his money.
You think?
I should have really said whatever. But, the grief can take the form of even me as a teacher. I grieve that I'm no longer in the classroom because the way I taught my subjects, which was social studies and arcade. And I listened to the other teachers teaching them, say, but why aren't they telling them about
Right.
You're not in the classroom anymore.
Yeah,
mind
and you
your
have
business.
to release.
Mind your business. And so just this year, I became the head of what we call our little social studies and arcade departments, which means I get to sort of intervene and introduce some things, particularly from social studies side. And so I've said, okay, as head of the department, I would wish that we would look at Black Bahamians for Black History Month. And so I gave them two.
Right.
Okay, Dr. Robert Love being one, which I gave to the primary school, and Stephen Dillett, which I gave to the high school. So we search our own.
Right.
Taking anything away from Rosa Parks and Dr. Martin Luther King, but they're not ours.
Right.
Let's look at some of our own people who have made a contribution not
in
only
the same
cause, but not only
in our
here but
context,
abroad.
right?
Okay, with Dr. Robert Love, he was the inspiration for Marcus Garvey. Very few people know that.
Wow!
And he was a Black Bahamian who came out of St. Agnes.
Wow!
In Bain and Grantstown. That's a rich history.
Yes, it is.
And the Jamaicans revere him.
Wow!
Okay, so why should we not be revering our own Bahamian?
Well, that's a whole other conversation.
Yes, which we'll leave for another time. But. But there's a grief for that too.
Yes.
I have a grief for that. We do not embrace who we are as a people. We continue to think that we have to always put a little extra something on it to make it palatable or better. Yes. And not realizing that as we are sufficient.
Exactly.
And this is what carried us to Sydney into an area at an age and time that was unheard of.
Acting,
and to make the kind of progress that was recognized during the civil rights time when everybody was fighting for rights. He was getting an honor.
That's right.
Okay.
And so Sidney Poitier as a Bahamian.
Yes.
Making a mark. I remember actually, and not to sidetrack too much, but I remember an interview that he did with Oprah Winfrey.
Yes, and
he totally blew her away.
Yes, his upbringing.
Right, and the way he responded in the civil rights movement was very different
from brothers and sisters.
Right, because of the upbringing and the more freedoms that were celebrated in our context and culture. Exactly, and to see someone, a Black person, operate at that level of freedom.
And not high yellow, Black.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
Because we tend, our little lighter brothers and sisters had just a little
bit advantage.
A little advantage. But to see that, and he didn't have all the crimps. Hair wasn't hard, but it wasn't crimps.
Right.
Okay? And to be able to make the mark and to this day be revered by people of all genres.
Right. And I'm sure he must have grieved having to leave his home.
Having to
and
leave
everything and go to a whole new land.
Yes.
All of those things tie in.
All of that is a grief. All of that is a grief.
And let's look at the context of work just before we take a break. Do you feel that there are lots of people who are grieving on the job because of on-the-job related stressors and situations?
Because we don't like change. And so the minute you're called into the supervisor's office or the manager's office and he has your file out and he says, I see where you just completed whatever. And so we'd like to move you from point A to point B. And immediately there's that. Because you've gotten comfortable. And so we never want to be moved from our comfort zone. All right. And you and I would have experienced this over the years as worship leaders and what have you, when you go into church and all of a sudden the Lord is telling you, well, you think I'm pulling you from there now. I'm going to send you over here, and you go kicking and screaming because, Lord, I really don't want to go.
And I don't have to go through having to explain that I'm leaving and all the drama that goes along with that.
And so that's real grief.
Yes, trust me.
That is real grief. And so, but you learn, hopefully, because in everything there's learning, everything there's purpose. And so I always use the analogy, okay, I'm back on the potter's wheel. Starting no longer than yesterday. I told one of my students, because he's from another Caribbean island, just came here a couple of months, and he's still grieving having left there to come here. And I said to him, think of it this way. I said, remember now, you've said you want to be a businessman, but you don't only want to be a businessman in Kingston. You want to have products that go worldwide. So see this as a part of your journey in that area to get there. Right. So you would now know what it feels like to be in the Bahamas, what they like, what they don't like, what your business could do here. And I pointed him to a young man who's a Jamaican who has a partnership with another young Bahamian, and they have what I think is island something or the other. But you always see the little emblem, the Bahamian flag and the Jamaican flag. Right, and they have this company where they're producing products for all of us. Right. I said, so think of it that way. I said, and put yourself in the place of the vase. I showed him a vase I had. I said, you know, that vase didn't just do like that. I said, it went through a lot of changes. I said, just think of it in the fire, with the glass being blown to get like that. I said, that's where you are.
It's funny that you should mention that, because I just ran into someone actually last night, and she is a Jamaican, and she's married to a Bahamian. Right. They have a lovely family and children and all, you know, the whole nine yards. But she said that she went home for the holidays. And she spent 2 weeks, and she said when it was time to leave home, she wept. And it's not that she is unhappy here. No. But it was the fact that home is home. Her parents were there. You know, the support system that you talked about. So, you know, having someone to leave the children with, and you can do things. And it's just different. It's just different. Just different. It doesn't mean that one is better than the other. No. But for her, it was very hard to now have to leave all of that familiarity. Right. And comfort and love.
Come out of the comfort zone.
Exactly. And come back out, even though she's been gone for quite a long time. But just to be back and reconnect with all of that, you know, becomes a challenge. And I found at work as well that things that can cause grief and pain and wounding is sometimes the relationships at work. And I'm not talking about romantic relationships. I'm talking about
the work,
the interactions, and the atmosphere, the environment. Sometimes I think can trigger
cause grief.
Outside of change.
Right. Outside of change. Okay. Personal experience. I'm at this small Christian school. The owner and principal is an Adventist. As you know, I'm an Anglican. Her partner is non-denominational / Pentecostal type. And there was always, because one of the things, and I'm diverting just a little bit, people do not understand. When you say you're a chaplain, that has nothing to do with being Christian. Chaplaincy is about being. It's about being there when somebody needs somebody.
Outside of religion
and everything. And so when they hear chaplain, they automatically expect you to be running around and speaking in tongues and dropping the Bible all over the place. And so there was that struggle. Well, if she's the chaplain, why isn't she doing so and so? And it used to grieve me. I said, why can't you understand? If that's what you need to do, that's who.
Right.
You understand?
Right.
And so it took a lot of fasting and praying for me to hold my tongue and just let her come to the place where she received that understanding. And thank God that happened for her over this Christmas holiday break that we had, where she came to me and she said, you know what, I can understand now why. She said, because our spirits were at war. I said, yes, they were.
Spirits and will. I think, it's about having a fixed mindset about how something should be,
as opposed
and we don't want to let that go.
And that becomes a grieving and
absolutely
vexing thing, because if you put the phone here like that, that's how you put it there.
Right.
But I may try to put it like this.
Right.
Doesn't make you wrong and me right.
Exactly.
Or vice versa.
Just different.
It's just different because I'm different.
Right.
And I'm me and you're you.
Exactly. So what about the person that's perhaps not faith-based or spiritual or anything, and they're in that same situation? I have a role to play. Mm-hmm. I've had to work in this type of environment. My background has been education and human resources.
Right.
So, of course, again, people have misinterpretations about the role of human resources.
Yes.
And so there are certain expectations that everyone will have of that particular role. Right. And so you would always have to try to sell or explain,
always having
what this is supposed to be. And this, what you're asking me to do, is really not aligned with what I should be doing in this role or something.
Yes.
So you found yourself in that same position where you have a role to play. And these people who are your superiors, who are your bosses, for instance, have a different interpretation of how you should perform your role. So for the person that may not be faith-based, how do you approach that? If these people are your bosses, they control your paycheck, they control whether or not you have a job. How do you really navigate that scenario?
The best I can tell you is my experience in Canada doing field work for this very same chaplaincy. And I was in a nursing home where you had Christians, but you also had non-Christians. And one that comes to mind is a little Japanese lady who, as most would know, for the Japanese, their religion is what they call Shinto. And it's very much ancestor-based, and, they revere the ancestors and that sort of stuff. And so I looked at her, and she smiled nicely. And I said, Lord, how do you do? Because I can't go in there and tell her, this is what Jesus said.
Right.
Because
it was Jesus.
It was Jesus, and I don't want to know.
Exactly.
And so the first thing my eye caught was a beautiful flower. I said, oh, that flower looks like our hibiscus in the Bahamas. And she said, Bahamas? I said, yes. And right from that. So nature was my calling card for her. Whenever I went to visit her, we talked about the plants. We talked about, and the common denominator that someone higher than us created this plant.
Right.
And so I was able to minister to her without throwing my Bible at her, without any of those things, familiar things that would have made it easier for me to do. With the Christian patient, I went in there with that. And so for me, it then became a joy because she was responding, to what we had in common.
So, I was just going to say, it's finding a common ground.
Finding common ground always.
So the common ground, going back to your school example, the work example, the common ground is they wanted, I guess, a certain type of interaction and delivery within that role. Right. So the common ground is we all care, we want to be here for the students. We want to support the students. It's really a matter now of interpretation. Okay. Do we turn to the left or to the right?
So what came out of that was the fact that there are three of us who are now making the administration. And I said to her, well, I know what my mandate is here. And I was basically saying to her, do you know what your mandate is? Because the tendency too is we know what our mandate is, but then we're journeying along and we're doing everybody else's mandate.
Right.
And that was her. And so when she got that revelation, what her mandate was to be, everything changed.
Right.
And then I was free, and I said, well, this is freeing now. I said, because I was really being tied, because this one wanted me to do that because they felt that that's what should be happening, and this one expected this because that's what they think it should be. Well, I clearly knew what it was supposed to be.
Yes. Stephen Covey wrote a book called The Third Alternative. And that is a part of, the message of that book is that, there's your way, there's my way, but there's a way that we can find together.
Yes.
That can forge a new way that we can both live with. Yes. That is what is considered win-win.
Win-win. Interestingly enough, the principal herself got the revelation, which affirmed it, because she and I never had the problem. It was more so the partner. And I think that caused things, because she would find, or she felt as though I always would want to do what the other person said. And I said, no, it's just that our spirits are connected.
Right.
Okay. So
common ground and understanding.
So when she would have said X, Y, Z, I said, something, I really wanted that, but now that you said it, that's confirmation, and vice versa. So that's how we operated, and she was always the one out there who she was trying to fit in the mold, type thing. So it
sounds as if, and that it sounds like a different dimension now that's added to that conversation, because what she may have been grieving was the inclusion of another person in this relationship.
Yes, that's exactly what it was. And so guess how it was put biblically. She said that the three of us carried different mandates. Mine was a Deborah. And I'd never thought of Deborah in that way. Mm-hmm. Because to me, particularly in teaching, Deborah was the first female judge in all of Israel. And so for me, that was about the empowerment of women. This was a woman who had this, all these men, and she was the only. And I never even looked at Deborah otherwise. Mm-hmm. And so that also speaks to how we interpret and get different messages. And so she said also there was the spirit of Gideon. Now I said yes, because for me, particularly when it relates to spiritual things, I'm going to go back and say, Lord, you have to show me a sign that this is from you. Mm-hmm. So I identified readily with Gideon. And then Samson. Samson, really? Anyway, but what was interesting with the Gideon one was that my colleague also identified with Gideon. But she identified with him from a place of what I would call negative. I am the least of.
Oh, yeah.
Now, that never crossed my mind with Gideon. Mm-hmm. My focus with Gideon was always that he wanted a sign.
Yeah, but his focus was first that, that was his first argument.
Yes, but I never went there.
We're the least of all the Israel tribes.
And I said, but... Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so again, we receive things differently. We receive
based on our experiences and our
so
mindsets.
For me, it was always about wanting to know that this was God's thing. So the fact that he was saying he was least, that went over my head.
Because that was not for you. It didn't resonate with you because that was not a part of your journey.
Right. But it resonated with her because that has been her journey.
Exactly.
And her family.
And then this is what can cause the conflicts between these work relationships.
Yes. And so
or any relationship.
Comes back to know thyself. Know yourself. Like I tell people, I know who I am, and I love Sanak for that. So I know who I am.
Yes.
Because knowing that now gives me a freedom also.
Absolutely.
So that I can
freedom
now
to be
and to say no, I can't do that because that's not something that I would do.
Exactly.
Unless, of course, God gives me the grace to do it. So that 10 years ago, I wouldn't have sat down with you here.
Wow.
Because maybe I was applying the I'm the least of you.
Yes.
To that.
Yes.
At that time.
Right.
Now, I could go in front of the Queen and say,
Here I am.
Here I am. Because I know who I am and whose I am.
Right.
And I think when you put those two together, you can function.
Yeah.
Now, next to that is the obedience. And that's, where we sort of...
Because again, it goes back to having to let go.
Yes.
In order for you to embrace something new, you have to let go of something old.
Yes.
And so even and I've experienced this again with the people in workplaces where they hold on to this mindset, and this becomes a stronghold by saying, this is how I am. This is how I am.
Oh, yeah, that's a crutch then.
But it is a crutch because you can release
speaking, but no, you're rude.
Right, exactly. And so it takes a little more effort to let me think about what I'm going to say to people before, and let me let that mentality go. Exactly. And people hold on to those, and it affects their responses and their relationships and everything, and how they execute their work.
And it comes to also to recognizing that you need to be trained. Yes, we have the Holy Spirit. Thank God. But the word also says, study to show thyself approved. Not only by God, but of men. And so that requires training.
Yes.
Okay? So yesterday an incident took place. No, Mr. Forgive, you'll get it. Oh, you're setting it down. And I thought to myself, this is where if she were trained in counseling, she would not have done that. You see, when you're dealing with people, or even in ministry, like I tell them, yes, if I get a message for somebody, I'm not going to shout it out in the middle of everybody.
Right.
I'm going to say to you, I need to see you. Because that's a private thing.
Absolutely.
This situation, to me, I would have done it differently.
Right.
Okay, and I would have said, because it was a sensitive issue, you know, when you're talking about how families interact with one another, and you're telling the individual, this is what your daughter says about you, but you're telling that to her in front of people.
No.
Okay?
Right.
And that's the difference between a trained counselor and somebody who's just well-meaning, though it was.
Right.
To me, it was out of place.
Right.
It should not have been done there at that time.
Right.
And then you add to it, your spouse is now on the side of you. Because it was a classic case of, the female was a little more domineering. And so that's what the child is picking up.
Right.
All right. But I would not have even
that's
said
not the
that
forum.
in front of
That's not
him.
the forum. Not the forum.
Okay. And so that's why training is necessary.
It's very important. And I want to just stick a pin there for us to take a break, because I want to talk a little more in depth about supporting the grieving person and things that we ought to say, things that
we should never say. Yes. The classic ones come to mind.
Exactly.
We'll save that for after break.
Yes. So you are tuned in to Ready for Change. I am your host, Simmone L. Bowe. I'm joined by Cecilia Askew, who is our expert guest, and our topic is grief, a response to change. We'll be right back.
Hey, this is Coffee Black, coming through to bring you the latest in sports, celebrity, and entertainment news. Here's the sip this week. So, as usual, the Kardashians have dominated celebrity news this week. So, Amber Rose came for Lil' Kylie Jenner, who was dating rapper Tiger, who was her bestie's baby daddy. Did you get it? So, the Twitter war with Khloe began. It has to be tough being a Kardashian because it's really hard to read somebody when you got a sister like Kim. All it takes is a few shots about her sex tape and it's game over. So, Kanye missed the memo that this secret and illegal relationship with Kylie and Tiger was not for the public when he confirmed that the two are in love on a radio interview. But here's where he crossed the line. He mentioned Beyonce and Kim actually love and respect one another. And yes, I just threw up saying that out loud. But here it comes again. He said Beyonce is inspired by Kim. Okay, I just can't. I'm just saying. Make sure you check out my site, thesipwithcoffeeblack.com, and tune in next week to The Sip with Coffee Black. No sugar, no cream.
To all of my female entrepreneurs, it's time to expand your region and business profits. Are you networking in the same locale and viewing the same guest list over and over? Do you find your colleagues are referring new business and its clients that you already have in your portfolio? Are you industry stagnant? And are your social groups and events filled with the same people? If you answer yes to just one of these questions, it's time to expand internationally. You are cordially invited to petition for attendance to an all-female exclusive and private event featuring the Power of 52 Women, the East Coast International Business Symposium, hosted by rockstar entrepreneur and international business consultant Erica A. Murray and multimedia distributor and expert Letitia M. And moderator Miss Joan Henry of the Women's Entrepreneur Expo, beginning February 28, 2015 in Baltimore, Maryland, March 28th in New York, April 18th in Washington, D.C., May the 23rd in Atlanta, Georgia, June the 20th in Boston, Massachusetts, and September, Africa. If you are serious about your business, don't miss this event. Go to www.thepowerof52women.com for more information. Once again, go to www.thepowerof52women.com and register today. This is an event you don't want to miss.
Some people talk about having meltdowns or breakdowns at times when they least expect. You know, they may be feeling a bit stronger and moving along, and it actually may have been a lot of time that's passed.
Right.
And then something may just trigger and you know, they feel emotional or cry, whatever. How do you deal with that?
Very carefully. I know it's happened to me, and I'm thinking, why is this person looking at me? You know, because the person came, you know, I thought I had it contained. I, you know, did the very English sniffling. And, you know, I had the tissue right there, so I thought I was, you know, quite all right until this person came and put their arms around me, and then I just blubbered. Okay, and so, well, it was in church, so, you know.
Yeah.
You know, it could have cost. But now, if you're on your job and you're sitting at your desk and you just find teardrops, try to maneuver to the restroom and continue the process. Don't try to stop it, because you can physically harm yourself by doing that. And if we're a male, I know that sometimes men are frowned upon for crying.
Yeah, which is so silly to me.
As a boy, you would have cried.
Yeah,
and you're
told,
just a bigger boy.
But as a boy, they're even told, big boys don't cry.
Suck it up.
That's right.
No. Tears have their role to play. And if you let them play their role, they can be quite comforting and soothing at the end of the day. If you find yourself having too many triggers too often, then you may want to seek professional help.
Right.
Or go to a counselor, because it means there's some deeper issues
that
are trying to come to the surface, and you're just constantly pushing them down.
Yeah.
So at some point, you're going to have to sit with somebody and say, look, I just need to get this out. If you're on your own, take to pen and paper. Take to pen to paper if you're at home, which I've done very often, and just write. You know, you call it a letter to God or whatever you want to call it, because it's just something that you need to get out. And once you get it out, you find you're relieved. Hopefully you would have torn up the paper and gotten rid of it, because it's not meant for anybody else's eyes. But it gives you an opportunity to relieve yourself of some things. But ideally, find somebody to talk to help you get to the root. If you're still at a stage of pain and guilt, you may find that that's really false guilt. That it's not something that you could have really done anything about at the end of the day. And so once you would come to terms with that, that's a part that you could now release.
Exactly.
And get rid of. And get on with the other process.
Yeah.
Or the further process.
Of healing and moving through the stages. I remember in our grief class, and I thought it was so cruel at the time, but I understand now why he was actually a psychiatrist who ran the group, and so we had a small group. And he would say if someone had that type of a breakdown, maybe they were sharing on something or reliving some moment that caused them grief, and they would have that breakdown, he would instruct us, do not go and comfort the person. And we thought that was so hard, because our automatic human response is to go and embrace and comfort. Yes. But what he says happens when we do that is that we are actually causing them either to ignite that, but really to suppress, as a matter of fact.
Yes.
Because when we go over what we call comfort is really shushing. Right? We're going over and say, okay, stop that crying now.
Because now we don't want that to affect us.
Exactly.
Because then you have a trigger effect and everybody in the group starts blubbering.
Yes. Or subconsciously that, something is wrong because we're crying.
Yes.
But we're looking at crying in the wrong way.
Yes.
Because crying is the release.
Tears of joy.
Right.
Because some people, they laugh till they literally cry.
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with them other than they had a good laugh.
Exactly. But again, it goes back to allowing people to feel what they're feeling. Otherwise, you must never allow them to feel it.
They have to feel it. It's like everything else that we have to go through. Birth is a beautiful thing. But what happens before that birth is not so pleasant. Lots of pain.
Lots of discomfort.
Lots of embarrassment, because some things are happening that normally you wouldn't wish anybody to see you in that position. But it's happening. but of course the outcome.
And the baby comes, and then all of the changes that come with that. You have changes in relationships, in your time, finances.
And that too is a grief, because now the poor husband is now,
second fiddle.
Very much
third or
fourth fiddle, because now all of the attention is on baby. You know, you didn't eat? There's some peanut butter and
you're a man, you can handle yourself.
Go to KFC, go to Bamboo Shack, do anything, but I'm here with my baby. And so he now has to adjust to that.
And she has to
recognize that he has needs as well, and he's still there, and he's the father. And so the common denominator there is the baby. And so you try to work through a schedule where, okay, you gotta spend time with little Johnny or little Mary.
Exactly.
And I'll take a break. You know.
And we need time for each other.
And we need time for each other.
And we need time alone.
And you need support for that.
Yes.
And so getting back to support. Support is simply that. And unfortunately, in our context, sometimes support groups become another prayer meeting, another Bible study. That's not support.
Right.
Support is to do exactly what we said. Come and you begin to share what's happening. And if you cry, then we all break out the tissues and cry with you, because we have that empathy. And if you pray at the end, that's fine. But you're not to come there to pray away the grief.
Right, and that's what we're doing.
And we try to do that with, these what I call heavy prayers, where, oh God of the mountaintop and the universe come down. No, you're not going to pray it away. Let it happen. And be there to catch that person.
And as you were saying, sometimes it is about being there. Sometimes being there and
it's
not saying anything.
That's all you need to do.
Just to
the
know
presence.
that you're present.
Just the presence.
And you're not judging me.
Not
you're not
judging,
trying to preach to me or
because
tell me to
I'm
be
not
different.
listening to you anyway.
Well, that's the other thing. And maybe sometimes we just don't.
Very common.
We try to say too much.
Right. And so on that note, and
let's talk about some of the things we don't say.
We don't do. And that being said, as one of my friends from Love and Hip Hop likes to say, that's his phrase. And that being said, don't ever tell a woman who's lost her husband, child, don't worry about it, you'll get another one.
Or a baby. Or you'll have another one.
Or you'll have... No.
Replacement
Do not tell me you understand. Because you don't. You're not me.
That's right.
You don't understand. Okay? Don't tell me I'm there for you and then every time I call I get your answering machine.
Exactly.
Or voicemail.
Right.
And you're not there.
Right.
Be very authentic in how you're going to support. If you're a very busy person as I am, I will say to you, I'll call you.
Right.
Because I'm going to do it at a time when I have the time to actually listen and hear you.
And even with that, don't say you're going to call if you're not going to call. Because you may set an expectation now. Not even may. You will set an expectation in that person.
Every time
I'm waiting on the call. There's no call.
No call.
You didn't call me. And they cause me to grieve again.
The loss of the call.
Exactly.
So it comes down to sensitivity, being very sensitive. How can you best help this person?
And shouldn't we ask? Because again, when you
say, how can I help you?
Right.
How can I
support you?
What
do you need from me? As opposed to assuming that you either want my company, you want me to bring food, you want me to come over, or let's go out.
Eat?
Or let's go to the movies. Or whatever. That may not be what I need.
No.
Ask the person.
Ask the person.
How can I support you?
How can I support
time?
you? And it can be very tangible ways that what we would call killing two birds with one stone. Say, for instance, if you're dealing with an elderly person whose husband has passed or whose wife has passed, and that individual is the one who looked after the finances. Can I go to the bank for you? Because you're going to go to the bank. Right. And so you can go to the bank, do what you have to do, and also assist.
Right.
Pay a bill or whatever.
Something like
do
that.
I'm going to pay BEC. Can I pay BEC for you? I'm going to pay cable. Can I pay cable for... So little gestures like that are very helpful, more helpful than people would imagine. Yes, the cooking of the food is good, particularly if you have families of children.
Right.
Well, definitely, those casseroles would go a long way because you freeze some and you use some.
Yes.
And so definitely, but if you're dealing with a single person now, who's now become a single person, they don't need a bunch of food. that they're going to throw away or give to somebody else. Just say, can I take you for your medication? And that too, to remember that some people may be on medication and in the process, they may forget.
Right.
So you can simply say, did you take your medication today? By way of helping them to now sustain themselves and stay healthy.
Right.
Okay. I remember the parish nurse who dealt with me, she looked up and she said, you're not eating, are you? And I was like, what? Eating? Because eating wasn't on my mind.
Right.
And what I was doing, I was just eating little cups of yogurt. And because that was a lot,
just to keep you alive,
And she said no. She said you have to eat. You have to eat. And so what she did, she orchestrated with the men of the church to come and be with him, while the ladies took me out and we went to lunch. And so little gestures like that may make all the difference. And so, having said that, looking at anticipatory grief, persons, your doctors mainly. If you're dealing with somebody who has terminal illness, they will suggest to you that you now prepare yourself for the inevitable. And so counselors do that. The doctor can do it. The nurse can do it. Hopefully in your churches you have persons who can do that also to prepare you.
And in the workplace.
Hopefully, that this occurs. And this is where chaplaincy also kicks in. Because you're there, that's the kind of presence you can be.
People who are retiring even.
And people who are
transitioning on, there's downsizing.
Retirement is a real grief for persons who have been active all their life, and then all of a sudden, boom. And you get up in the morning, you shower, you get dressed, and then you realize, I don't have nowhere to go. And statistics have shown that a lot of suicides take place in that particular age bracket.
I've heard
the late 50s,
more
60s.
so than teenagers.
More so than because they've lost a sense of purpose. And so you now have to get renewed focus.
And that's why when I teach about focus and vision, and people I remember this last session I did very recently, there was a lady in there that got very agitated with me because I started to press her about her purpose. We were talking about that. And I was telling them that your purpose is greater than what role or responsibility you may have.
Right.
So yes, you may be a mother, you may be a wife, you may be a father, you may be a business owner, a pastor, whatever it is.
Yes.
That's a role that you play. That doesn't, your role, you may express your purpose through that role, but that may not be your purpose.
Exactly.
So when you tie in your value for life and living and accomplishment in a particular role or a job or something, when that is gone, then you feel like there's no sense of identity.
There's no sense of identity. What am I living for?
What am I living for? But when you recognize that your purpose is greater than a job, so when I've tapped into understanding what I do, what I'm doing here now, I can do at any time, anywhere,
anyhow,
on a job, not on a job.
Exactly.
And so and I've had all of those experiences in life where I've had a job, not had a job, worked for myself, had a business, closed the business, married, not married. I mean, but the purpose was the thing that kept me grounded. And that was consistent in everything else, that I had a reason to keep moving and pressing because I was not defined by all of those things.
No.
But refined by my experiences.
Refined by the experiences on the potter's wheel.
Exactly.
And so it means, too, that who you surround yourself with helps you with your purpose also. Because you can very easily, and unfortunately for those persons who don't have a faith base, I really can't speak to them and what they can do in that regard. But for those of us who do have a faith base, the word tells us that we have purpose, that we were fearfully and wonderfully made for that purpose. And so once we find out what that is, and we are surrounded by people who could speak life into that purpose. So that, for instance, even though I spent 30 plus years in banking and finance, I had always been told that I should be a teacher. And I resisted because I was like, how dare you? I'm not going to teach.
I'm in my fancy job.
Thank you, I'm not teaching. And the Lord purposely let me, experience a whole lot of stuff in the context of banking and finance till I got to where He wanted me to be. So, and you're not talking about now accumulating wealth. because of that. But the richness that I'm getting now, you cannot put a price tag on.
Exactly.
Because when you help to mold and shape a life in a positive way, there are no dollars and cents that could ever pay for that. And so I am now happy, even though they make me mad and they get on my nerve. If I think now, if I had to move myself from that, I would be, but knowing now that there's somebody there who's looking to me for some sort of guidance, and to know that each step is taking me to another assignment, because God alone knows the plan. Okay? And it's for us to work the plan. Now, if the plan is as it is in this particular case, I know that in a couple of years, this assignment that I'm on will be complete. But I can already see him preparing me for the next assignment.
So it's always a continuation.
So it's a continuation.
Now you will grieve.
I will grieve moving on.
But that's natural.
It's natural.
Because you've made connections.
And I've already grieved the loss of being in the classroom. But I know physically I no longer have the stamina. Okay? But I still grieve, like I said earlier. Why isn't she teaching?
Because of things that you would have wanted to do.
I would have wanted to impart. But the Holy Spirit has shown me that through family life, there's some things I can still push, through that venue, or through that avenue. And so I said, okay, she's not telling them about that in RK, but I'll tell it about it in family life.
Right. And so it's about being open and having different mindset toward what you're doing and not being so fixed.
Not boxed in.
Exactly.
Not boxed in.
And so that works even in, and like I said, I've worked in many arenas that have not been faith-based.
Right.
And the principles, because that's the great thing about faith is that the principles still
remain the same no matter what arena you're in.
Exactly. They work. Now, it works better in our opinion.
It works better with faith.
When you work along with the source of the plan.
It does.
So it saves a lot of heartache. It's moving on down the line, with making turns and twists that maybe you shouldn't have made because you did it more on your own strengths and mindset and outlook as opposed to yielding yourself to, what may be considered that greater perspective.
Yes.
That's greater than our own.
That's greater than our own.
And so when we talk about grieving, let's talk a little bit about children and helping children who may be experiencing grief, because as someone again who works with young people, a lot of times what we see happening, a lot of times we want to focus on the symptoms of what's going on with young people, and we want to berate them for certain behaviors that they're exhibiting, but there's always a root to what's going on. And I can tell you from experience, young people, and I've worked with at-risk young people for most of my career. Right. And so a lot of times these young people are hurting very badly. They're hurting because mommy and daddy got divorced. Yes. They're hurting because perhaps their relationship didn't work out. Pain and guilt. Maybe they were never married, but I don't have the relationship with one of the parents that I really want to have. I remember the first time, you hear these stories, but I remember the first time I heard it myself in a group discussion with some of my students, and the young man said, I said something about father or whatever, and he said, I never met my father. That hit me like a ton of bricks. I mean, you hear that, but to actually hear a young person say that,
that's the reality for him.
That's the reality of and he was termed a very troublesome boy. He was on drugs, behavioral issues, not doing well in school. But here it is now, people are only looking at him and labeling, and I hate labels. Labeling him as this bad boy without getting to the root of the fact that he's a young man. He's now a teenager, and he doesn't have a father.
No identity.
That's
he doesn't
serious.
know how to identify it.
As a man.
He's in a household with females.
He is. A mom and two sisters. So he now is the man.
That compounds the issue. Because a lot of things can go wrong. And so again, having been a single parent, I had the benefit, and I have to keep going back to faith-based, because in the church, I had men that he could relate to.
Right.
And so I thank God for an Archdeacon Palacios. I thank God for Canon Tynes, or Canon Campbell as he is now, who at some point spoke into his life. And even the very late Canon Roach, I remember him saying to me, he said, something happened, and he said, but that's not a crime. Because he was looking from a man's perspective.
Exactly.
And he said to me, I once had to go to jail too, And I looked at him and said,
really?
Because this is a man of the cloth, and you don't expect that. But he said, it's not a big deal. At least he didn't go.
Man, he was awesome with young people.
And so, that changed my perspective. I realized, okay. But having said that, where our young people need to have, and this is why I'm working with PACE now, we're trying to even bring the men on board, even though it's for the girls, because we need these fathers to step up to the plate, not so much for the young lady, but for the child, so that you can start breaking this generational cycle so that it does not continue.
Because I found even with the naming, many times now, single moms give their name to especially their male child. And I think that has a psychological impact on them to an extent as well. I don't know if it's again, it goes back to identity. I think it's the identity and identifying with their fathers.
What the late Archdeacon Murillo Bonamy told me. When I had my son, I initially put the father's name on the birth certificate. And he neither cared to or went to register the birth or pay for the certificate or any such thing. And Archdeacon Bonamy said to me, he said, you have a name. Give him your name. And I said, okay. And so for me, now, I may be rare, but when that happened, my father was still alive, meaning his grandfather, his uncles,
So there's a sense of identity.
So there was a sense of identity
that connected him
with a legacy.
Yeah,
and so that worked for me.
Yes,
I think in this day and time, though, very often, sad to say, father is really unknown because the young lady really does not know.
Wow.
And so, and she herself may not have had a father in her life.
Exactly.
There may be no uncles or grandfather. And so, yes, now to give this young man your name then becomes tricky.
Yes.
It does. And I can see both sides. Having lived it my way, because it worked for me, but I can also understand the young lady who didn't have the father in the home.
You have to do what you have to do.
And so you basically, again, have to be guided.
But how do you help the child through this process?
And this is where we need our counselors, our mentors. They don't have to be pastors, because we tend to think everybody has to be a priest or a pastor or a minister. No, just someone who has good character, who hopefully has a relationship with the Lord, who can then impart wise and sound counsel without becoming a predator, because that's also a reality.
And a risk.
And a risk that you have people who are so willing to be there for you, but their motive may be not so good.
Harmful than good.
And more harmful than good. And so then you get the loss of identity, because now this person has imposed a whole different thing on you from a place you were never supposed to be going.
And abuse is one of those things
comes with that.
Causes those
and so
triggers too.
It's not a black and that's one of those areas. I don't like to say the gray area, but this is one of them. And it's really going to depend on the strength of the mother's home life or lack thereof. And so, like I said, I had that. I was fortunate. Then, of course, I went back to the church. And so to have the connection where he would have had some of those priests as his teachers. He would have had them as his pastor. Okay. And so they were able, through the different functions that we had at the time, like your spark and your infusion and all the little Christian-based things that went on, activities that I was able to keep him in to help the process for him. Okay, until now, of course, thankfully he knows his father, but he still has my name, my former name, I should say. Okay, and so now he has a son that he's passed that on to.
That's right.
And so that legacy of Trotman continues.
Yes.
And so that worked for me.
Right.
Cannot say and recommend that everybody go that route because that may not apply.
Right.
So
you have to look at your situation and do what's best.
Do what's best in your situation. If the young lady has not had a father in the home and there are no male influences and this is a young boy, then definitely you have to perhaps lean a little more on the father and say you really need to be in this young man's life.
And I find that to be the challenge because many times because the relationship has changed between the mother and the father, the child or the children are punished.
They are punished for
because
their fathers.
I don't want. I'm not talking about if the person is a danger to the child. I'm talking in a different scenario altogether.
Having your identity,
just having a relationship
and knowing who you are, because that's important.
Very important.
Very important.
So what about encouraging young people to talk? Because a lot of times, the old school mentality is that children should be seen and not heard, and you're rude if you open up and all that. But we need to encourage, I think, more communication. To help them process their feelings.
And one of the avenues I'm hoping, and I hope I could get your support for, further down the road as the Lord reveals more to me. It's happening in other parts of the world successfully. And one of the things I'd like to see happen, I know Canon is working on that, and that's to have a chaplain in schools who, different from the guidance counselor, whose main activity in a school is career-based, to push you towards a career. Not necessarily to give you spiritual advice or anything like that, although thankfully you do have some who can do that.
Right.
But that you have that in place, but also something known as peer counseling, where young people themselves are trained to be able to help their own. Okay, peer counseling, where we train the young persons to assist the mentoring of their peers. So, for instance, you have a strong leadership ability, and you can recognize in some of your students, those are the ones who would qualify best, and you train them to listen.
Right.
Particularly in the schools where a lot of abuse takes place and is not known until there's a pregnancy, or a child, God forbid, picks up a disease, and then you realize, well, he or she was being molested by someone in the home or in school, and nothing is
or at church,
or at church, or at church,
in their club,
or just being pulled off the street.
Exactly.
All right, and so for them, because they're not going to come to me, the guidance counselor. Okay,
not initially,
because, like you said, old fogey, and then they don't want you to preach the word and that kind of stuff. But they will say to a friend, "So and so is happening to me." And so that peer counselor at that point then can come to me,
right,
and say, so and so confided in me, and that's why. And then of course we have to go through all the protocols that's required, the social services, the whatever the case may be, to help that child.
Right.
And so hopefully that's something that we could have in all of our schools, private and public, because children are at risk no matter what.
Absolutely.
And there's a fallacy that we feel that children who go to private schools are better off. No, they're going there simply because their parents can afford to put them there.
Right, or they're sacrificing
to put them there for academics.
Right. Or
sports. And they may feel as though, well, this is initially all I want. But when you look at them, and I see it every day, and I'm saying to myself, you are beating this child down for what you used to do when you was a child.
Exactly.
Okay? Exactly. And you have not learned enough to say, okay, I remember when I used to do this.
A lot of times it's the guilt, right? And shame.
And the shame.
And
don't want to admit, I used to do that too.
Right.
But, we have a couple of individuals who you look at them and you look at them and say, yeah. continual cycle. Continual cycle. And, you know, I can remember thinking to myself, boy, you must have put your mother through. Because this child is really putting it on you.
Right.
You know,
right.
And I don't care how we try to dress
cycles
it up.
Repeat themselves if you don't deal with them.
If you do not deal with it.
And it's subconscious. We don't even realize a lot of times because we just assimilate
it
also through the environment.
Cultural, because we have some situations where some people, their parents are from another country, and in that country, certain things are the norm and acceptable, but not here.
Right.
But yet, because that's in you, inherent in you, you're doing it.
Exactly.
Like you said, subconsciously, because it's a part of your DNA.
Exactly.
All right?
Exactly.
And so definitely in all cases, there must be training, there must be education, must be prayer, if that's appropriate for you, because we also have to be realistic and know. And I tell my fellow ministers who I work with from time to time, I've reached a place in my life where I realize not everybody wants to be saved or hear about the Lord. It's painful, but that's the choice that they have made. And as an adult, you make your choices.
Exactly.
And the popular term is now, you must know if you make that choice. There's a pastor that I listen to now. He said, you're free to go out there and have sex with anybody you want to have it with. But be prepared for the consequence.
Exactly.
You're free to go
out there.
The
principles hold true.
Regardless. And so you could drink as much as you want to drink, but be prepared for the consequence.
And as a Christian, you can do those things.
It's the same thing. It's the same process. The same thing. You will be side by side on the ward.
Exactly.
Okay? And so to remember that always. And as Christians, to not feel as though everybody wants to be. We would hope that they want to be. We would hope that we live. Father Bartlett said last week, and I thought it was so profound. Live a sermon.
Yes.
Instead of preaching the sermon. And if you live a certain way, people will see how you're living and gravitate. Say, okay, I really want some of that. But if you are holy hands and hallelujah and talking in tongues and tripping over yourself in church on a Sunday, but cussing people out on Monday, not helpful. No. Not helpful. Or if I see, or even me, I mean, and I hate to admit it, but if I come to an event that you have, and in my mind, because I'm older and from my era, you were supposed to dress the role you were in, right? So now you're coming and you're a prophetess or you're an apostle or whatever. But you have on a skirt where it doesn't matter. If you didn't have it on, the effect would still be the same. I can see everything. I'm not hearing you.
Yeah.
Because I'm...
Yeah, you're caught up on the outfit.
I look at the veins.
So when we go back then to talk about grief and a response to change, it's important that we become the support. And we support through those various means, mostly by, how we live, presence,
how we live, how we speak.
Yes.
Okay.
What we say.
And what we say is very important.
And not to despise the grieving process.
No, let it take as long as it takes. If you notice 5 years down the road that the person is still in the same outfit and has the room the same way and the plate and the dish and the spot, then you know they have a problem.
Right.
But if they are going about their normal course of being and every now and again they shed a tear when they hear their loved one's name, that's okay.
Yeah.
That's okay. That's a part of their process. Right. Thank God if you were one of those who the spouse died on Monday and by Wednesday you were happy-go-lucky, good for you.
Yeah.
Because that may be how you are made up.
Exactly.
Okay.
But not everybody's like that.
Or, as I like to point out, maybe that spouse you was praying, they was gone long time. And so you really having a party. Okay. But for those of us who we would have wished to have had our spouses longer, just let us go through our process and respect the process. Okay. And be available. Yeah. I think the best thing you could do is just be available. When I call, I'm calling now because I really need you.
Right.
Okay, but not that every morning, first call I get you on the phone. Can I help you? And you become, no. Let me grieve the way I'm supposed to grieve. Be sensitive to know that the way Simmone is going to grieve is different from the way Cecilia is going to grieve, and be present for both.
And we could not end on a better note. Thank you so much, Cecilia. Ask you for being here and sharing with us
a pleasure.
On grief, a response to change. I think very profound. So many different rich bits of information to I know we got off track a few times.
But all in the process of grief.
Exactly. All for the cause.
All for the cause.
But thank you, and I know this will not be the last time that you will
definitely
be on our show. So thank you so much again for being here.
Thank you.
And you are tuned into Ready for Change. I'm your host, Simmone L. Bowe. We will be right back after this commercial break.
Hi, I'm Rita Ricks, host of Spirit Journeys Radio, and I'm pleased to announce that discussions in February will focus on your purpose. Many of my clients often ask me questions like, what is my purpose? How do I find it? How will I recognize it? These are certainly appropriate questions to ask when you feel as though something is missing in your life. My role as life coach is to help you to begin to identify what your true purpose is and what gifts you already have to effectively live your purpose. I have some wonderful guests willing to share how they view their purpose and what purpose means to each of them. You will benefit greatly from hearing them. So join me every Tuesday night from 8 to 9 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. You can dial 646-652-2512 to listen and chat. I look forward to spending February with you. And I'm Rita, listening to your spirit.
Hi, my name is Letitia M., owner of May We Help You Network. I want to thank you for joining us and enjoying our host here on MWHY Radio Network. Please visit us online at mwhyradio.com and like us on facebook.com/MWHY Radio. Tune in to learn more about our host and upcoming contest and our TV programming that'll be coming to you soon. MWHY Radio, bringing together business, community, and you.
You have been tuned in to Ready for Change. Are you ready for change? This is the show where we don't just talk change, we live change. And so if you are ready for change, this is the show that will help you navigate whatever change you're going through, whether that is personal, whether that's professional, whether that's your business, your vision, whatever it is. This is the show that will help you and support you as you navigate the significant changes and transformations and transitions that you will experience in your life. I'm your host, Simmone L. Bowe, transformation and transition strategist, transformational speaker, author, mentor to visionaries, and listen, your show host and your fellow journeyer through life and through change. Thanks for tuning in, and join us once more on the May We Help You Network every Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern. Ready for change. Are you ready for change?
Take my heart, Lord, 'cause I'm really desperate for change. I don't wanna be the same, no, 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 no. I am crying out to you, 'cause only you are able to make me brand new.